himself a Marxist versus a Marxist-Leninist, what are the determining factors between that? Like, why would someone declare themselves a Marxist and not Marxist-Leninist?
There's several things that might be said. Greg might handle this question more better, but what I would say is they probably didn't read Marx close enough that they didn't declare themselves a Leninist, because if you read Marx and you read Lenin, Lenin's basically teasing out a lot of ideas that Marx and Engels wrote, such as having the communists be of the proletariat and organizing the proletariat. Right? This is in the Communist Manifesto. And so a lot of people kind of take this divergence towards, oh, well, actually, let's go back and look at early Marx, because he was more of a humanist and he had better ideas, these notions of alienation, and we need to start approaching these rather than actually, legitimate political work. And do you have other ideas?
Actually, you'll probably get a good answer in my lecture. The main reason why people declare themselves Marxists instead of Marxist-Leninists is because of the Kronstadt. And what they feel is they feel that Leninism and the Vanguard party that it advocates is too hierarchical, too rigid, too structural. And so they view any approach like that as doomed to end in a tyranny in their hyperbolic way, worse than capitalism.
And that's what I've always assumed. That's why I wondered, but I'm not nearly as aware of Marxist-Leninists, of course, or Marx in general. But so. Where does that criticism come? Because after hearing what Lenin's words from Chris, it sounds like that he was dedicated to the idea of it not being hierarchical. So where does that criticism arise? Is it actually an actual playing out to come to be so?
Yeah.
That's what I.
Well, there are two main criticisms that come from, or two main left communist approach criticisms of Lenin that play themselves out. One actually precedes the Soviet Union, which is the Luxembourgian left communist from Germany, which then gets taken up by, for example, the Italian left and the ultra-leftists in Europe. And their criticism is this: look, you can have a party or some sort of organization, but as a matter of fact, what needs to happen is there's going to be an uprising. And you can't control an uprising, you can't start an uprising, uprisings just happen. And all those uprisings basically have to come from the workers. And if they don't come from the workers, then what's going to happen is they're going to be easily crushed or easily destroyed. And so any attempt to give any formal structure to these uprisings is ultimately a fruitless task. And so this is one of Luxemburg's core criticisms of Lenin. The other left communist criticism of Lenin is that the very act of having a vanguard differentiates yourself from the workers qua workers. And so what it leads to is it leads to this extra alienation between the workers and their political organ. And so if it ever has any success at all, it's going to just lead to this alienated, totalitarian, oppressive, destructive, horrible, awful thing. And this was actually mainly a criticism leveled by actually the economists, right? Because the economists were very workerist in their ideology. If you didn't come from a factory worker, if you weren't a factory worker or your parents weren't factory workers, then you couldn't really be a communist. And so their idea was, if you're not a worker, you don't really know what it's like, and therefore any politics that aren't directly involved with the workers, qua workers, are doomed to alienation and failure. And so that would be those are the two main criticisms.
Yeah, the point is a lot of people try to divorce themselves from Lenin because a lot of people say, oh, well, Leninism was really, maybe it was okay, but what it really leads to is Stalinism, and we don't want Stalinism because that was just terrible. And so it's a quick move to distance themselves. And actually, you'll notice it develops other strains of thought, which usually gets pegged as Marxian rather than Marxist. You can see this in the Frankfurt School with people like Adorno and Marcuse, who basically make criticisms and say, look, all the Soviet Union really was just state capitalism. And so it's kind of a doomed project, and it's not really going to work out to liberate the people in the ways we really expected. And so really we should avoid Leninism. And again, somebody like the board's going to say, look, you revolutionaries, you just need to realize you can't use alienated forms to fight alienation. And again, it goes back to this notion of what you're bringing up as far as, oh, well, there's a hierarchy of people who are above everybody else and giving orders. And again, Lenin's pretty specific. It's not simply this elitist class of people who begin giving orders. It's people coming from the working class and people coming from schools and other intellectuals, and they're working together. And granted, he makes a pretty important distinction. He says, look, there's going to be some people that you can basically progress and become agitators. Other people, they're going to do work too. They're going to hand out pamphlets because it's all needs to be done. It's not simply a course of what we need is just to have one person deciding everything.
Okay, so why if I understand correctly, theorists like Hart and Negri would not identify as Marxist-Leninist, right?
No, they're
And
as anti-Leninist.
Okay, and so my introduction to their philosophy is not substantial, and so why do they declare themselves so? Like, because I'm assuming that their reasons would be different than the two that you just.
Well, one of the reasons, my rudimentary understanding of Hart and Negri is the fact that they think that workers' struggles, like the actual class interest of the proletariat, has spread to other areas, right? And so we need to concern ourselves with all exploitation everywhere. And to be fair, I mean, this is covered in Leninism, like when working class individuals, like their consciousness, if it doesn't exceed the political consciousness, which is to say they're concerned about police brutality when Oscar Grant gets shot in Oakland, they should be striking in protest of police brutality. Or when women are being oppressed somewhere for working conditions, all factories all around them need to be striking in support and solidarity to other workers. But where Hart and Negri seem to take it is, look, there's exploitation everywhere, and so as long as you're resisting in your own sort of way, regardless of who you connect with, then you're kind of your own revolutionary.
Like the diversity of movements as opposed to one singular.
Right. They basically think that there needs to be this massive multitude coming together and striking. And another thing they pick up on is it's sort of this critique of, well, material factory conditions. It's not so like industrial 1840s where Engels is writing on working conditions.
And I'm familiar with that a little.
Right. So it's more this pursuit of intellectual property, and they kind of basically just try to encompass every act of resisting exploitation becomes some sort of a revolutionary act for them. If it's the person who's not shopping at Walmart, they're a revolutionary. But do you have anything?
Well, actually, a lot of Hart and Negri goes back to the second criticism, right? The Leninist Vanguard, right, to the left columns is this alienated, separated thing, right, above and beyond the people. Well, basically, Negri and Hart just take a very theoretical approach to this. And you can notice this especially in their discussion between immanence, right, which is something that occurs inside of it and arises out of it naturally, and transcendence, right? For them, the Revolutionary Party is a transcendent one, and so ergo bad, right? It's alienating, it's just a reproduction of the state, whereas theoretically, right, the immanence of Spinoza, right, is the multitude, right, that just resists immanently. So when you file share, you're just doing something immanently out of yourself to resist capital, as opposed to a transcendent struggle for a party or state. Does that make sense?
Okay. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Just on that though, as far as I know, they don't specifically attack. they don't make a reading of Lenin and critique Lenin.
Oh well, yeah,
it's
and
much
I'm sure that they appreciate that.
vague than that. I think it would be more Leninist to take exception to their the naivety of their approach than. I mean, I think they don't. They're not Leninists. I mean, they don't really take a strong look at anything and really look critically at it at all.
Well, have you read?
Yeah.
I guess I appreciate your comment. I guess I would disagree with that, but I appreciate it. Sorry.
Do you have a response?
Oh, well, I mean, part of, they make vague critiques, right? Lenin is basically tied up to Lenin, state, God, transcendent, right? And so they just view the critique of transcendence as a critique of the state, and a critique of the state as ergo a critique of the Leninist Vanguard.